It's always contentious when a foreigner wants to buy an agribusiness because, rightly, it raises fears that we're selling off the farm. Human nature being what it is, it's a worry when the neighbouring property is sold to an outsider. But for every farm sold to an offshore interest, we shouldn't forget that in addition to a willing foreign buyer, there's almost always a local willing to sell. Still, that doesn't mean it should be open slather in what we sell and to whom, particularly when there's growing concern that purchases of businesses like processing plants could create vertically integrated agricultural models that will lock out Aussie farmers or make our agriculture sector price takers and therefore vulnerable over time. So the anxiety about the proposed sale of Lion Dairy to China's Mengenu Dairy Company is hardly surprising, especially after the earlier proposed sale to Mengenu also of the infant formula maker Bellamy's Organic. First, because it's China, and second, because this is all about dairy. Selling anything to China worries people these days, especially when the new owner might be expected to pre-sell all the product into a Chinese market that can't get enough of clean, safe Australian dairy products, leaving nothing for consumers here at home. Then there's the concern that all Chinese businesses, but especially ones like Mengenu with a substantial state shareholding, are ultimately under the direction of the Chinese government. And of course, anything in dairy these days is especially fraught, given the worries about the drought and in particular, concerns that selling milk for as little as $1 a litre is ripping off our farmers, which of course it is. $1 milk was originally a marketing gimmick to get consumers through the doors of Coles and Woolies, but it's become an albatross around the neck of the dairy industry, with the big supermarkets screwing down milk processors and the processors, now nearly all large, mostly foreign-owned businesses, in turn screwing down our farmers. It's in no one's long-term interest to price out of business Australia's dairy farmers who have to milk their cows twice a day, 365 days a year. Yet at $1 a litre in the shops, and less than half that to our farmers, we pay less for milk than we do bottled water. And that makes the industry, any way you look at it, unsustainable. Hence the calls for a floor price or a minimum price paid to farmers for the milk they produce that at least covers the cost of production, make it easier for them to stay in business. But nothing in the dairy sector is simple. Lion Dairy, Australia's second largest dairy producer, with brands such as Dairy Farmers, Pura Milk and Berry, it's actually been in foreign ownership since 2009, when it was bought by a Japanese brewer. Indeed, the truth is that it's been a long time since most of the 280 milk producers that supply Lion have been dealing with the Farmers Co-op. If Mengenu wanted to make this deal more palatable, they talk to their farmers and offer them a floor price for milk somewhat above current prices. After all, a fair contract between all players in this sector would be far preferable to heavy-handed regulation. And Mengenu must think the business is profitable, hence they're buying it, so why shouldn't Australian farmers take their fair share of the profits they help to make? And if the Foreign Investment Review Board wanted to reassure a sceptical public about having Australia's national interest first and foremost, it would place significant conditions on this sale, even if it was minded to proceed. At a minimum, there should be an Australian majority on the board, and management must be Australian. But even with this, and even with the argument that this Australian milk processor is already foreign-owned, I have to say there's a world of difference between a Japanese-owned company operating under the usual free market rules and a state-owned Chinese entity buying up more of our agriculture assets at a time when there's plenty of evidence, isn't there, that China wants more out of this country than just our cow's milk. The issue of increasing Chinese ownership of Australian assets is looming as a very difficult issue inside the coalition and amongst coalition voters in particular. At the very least, the idea that China can buy assets here that no Australian would be able to buy in China should have the government thinking seriously as to whether the foreign investment rules need to change.